Hi, welcome to Brain Sews. Today I got a little video on the process I go through to cut out a pair of jeans from start to finish. And I'm going to be using electric scissors in this video to do the whole thing. And the electric scissors make a loud buzzing sound, so I've deleted the voice or the audio track on this video, and I'm going to just do a voiceover with music, so it's a little bit more pleasant to watch. They sound a little bit like the kids at school call them the angry duck. So it's a noise that I think if you're the one doing the cutting, it's not bothersome, but to have someone else in the room using these, it's a little irritating. So what you see here is you see I've got my pattern printed out. This is my new jeans pattern. I almost always start with a new pattern because I always make changes. And you can see I print that out on the printer that's right there by the side of the table. And what I do first is I rough cut out all the different pattern pieces. So now that's done. I'll just move some of the stuff off to the side. What I do first is this pair of jeans has a perfectly straight side seam, which makes cutting them out even easier because I can make one cut down the middle, and that can be for both the front and the back leg. So what I'll do first here is line up the side seams and actually glue the pattern pieces together using a little glue stick. So this just keeps everything held together nice and tight. And then what I'm doing is I'm just lining up the cutting line. Okay, a little glue there, maybe a little glue in the middle. Sorry, I should have turned the autofocus on the camera off. It's gonna come in and out of focus every time I move. Probably due to the low light in the room. So first thing I need to do is select the denim I'm gonna use. I keep all my denim, it's basically on the floor underneath my clothing rack that I keep all my fabric hung on. To me, pulling the denim chunks out, it's almost like selecting a pelt to use. They're heavy, they're unwieldy. Definitely not going to use those. Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll try to use up, if I've got, it's hard to tell with unwashed denim, it's somewhat hard to tell what it's going to look like. So I'll just, usually look and see what the texture's like. If it's cooler or winter, I'll usually use a thicker denim. For summer, I'll try to use a thinner one. And I'll try to find a piece that I can use up the remainder of. I try to use up the denim as much as I can. There's most of this denim I probably got for less than $4 a yard. If you wait for the right sales, denim is really cheap. And considering that it comes super wide, it's made of a lot of cotton, you can still find it cheap. So you also notice I only use unwashed denim. This is all raw, unwashed, unprocessed. And I've taken into account that I use unwashed denim, and so my pattern is actually made to be shrunk. So if I was to use unwashed denim and make them exactly the right size, obviously they would shrink quite a bit. Unwashed denim shrinks, it maybe shrinks up to 4 inches in the length, depending on, it just depends on the denim itself. I've noticed that more of a coarse denim usually shrinks more than a thinner or finer weave denim. Denim is often sold by by the ounce. So how many ounces a particular length, I think it's a yard, weighs. However, it's not universal, so it's not like you can just easily find, like 14-ounce denim. You walk into Joann's and it may or may not say that on the end of the bolt. And most of what they have at regular fabric stores like Joann's is almost always pre-washed or pre-treated in some regard. So first thing I'll do is cut the legs. So those are the biggest piece I need to think about here. Get everything lined up as much as I can. And what I'll be doing here is, since I know my side stream is seen as straight, that is my straight of grain. So to verify that I've got my pattern pieces lined up properly on the grain, I'll use a measuring tape here and square them up this way. This is a real essential part of making any kind of clothing, is making sure your pattern pieces are exactly on the grain or off the grain, exactly how they're supposed to be, basically. I think we've all bought those t-shirts that you know, I feel like they're discount t-shirts is where I usually find them in discount places, where you're like, oh my gosh, this great t-shirt for $2, and then you buy it and you wash it the first time and it comes out of the wash and the side seams are twisted around your body and you can't figure it out. Every time you untwist it, it just goes right back. And that's because that's probably why it was on discount clearance, because they cut the fabric out off grain so it will twist. If you cut your jeans off grain, oftentimes the leg will twist. I think I've even had jeans that do that. So you can see here, just using electric scissors, I'm cutting around the outline shape first. This particular brand of electric scissors, well, this is kind of a companion video to a more in-depth review of this tool, so maybe I won't talk about it too much here. I will say that they are an awesome tool to use. I can probably cut out 4 layers of denim with these. They have a few different brands, and this is the, I'd say this is the one that's more appropriate for using at home. I have a heavier duty pair that I use at work that the blades have not dulled, and you can cut multiple layers of fleece. I can probably do 12 layers of quilting cotton. I mean, it's just pretty awesome what these scissors can do. Especially cutting out denim with a rotary cutter is a pain. It is, you're like, sawing through. You've got to put so much pressure on to get through all the layers, and then there's some little bits that don't get cut. And these scissors are just make life really easy. And I found it's actually easier to cut out my fabric with the paper on top. So you can cut around the edges of things fairly easily, but if I'm actually cutting off the line on the pattern, it really works really well with these scissors. The paper kind of holds all the fabric in place, and it makes it very easy to just cut right on the line. And since I print my patterns out almost new every time I use them, it's really easy. Make sure everything's straight again before I cut down the center and cut the 2 legs apart. What's nice about the electric scissors is that you don't have to be right on top. Like with the rotary, you've got to be right, you gotta get your weight into it to get a good clean cut. With the electric scissors, you can cut with your arm, way across the table and not, have to have your body leaning right over the top of what you're doing. So let's take these pattern pieces, and likely I'll never use these again, so I'll throw them in the recycling, which happens to be right there. So the legs are done. I really like cutting out jeans, and I like taking, this is a really easy pair. There's not enough of this denim left to cut out another pair. So cutting out the pockets and all the other facings and stuff will be very easy with this. Sometimes you have less denim and you have to be creative about, where you're going to fit the pieces in. So, and I'll still try to conserve as much as possible. I like having extra denim scraps laying around. Are great for. Denim's great for testing out stitches. When I'm doing something with embroidery, and I want to test out a design or just, see how things are working, I'll just, throw a piece of denim in a hoop. You don't have to use any interfacing or stabilizers or anything like that when you're, embroidering on denim. It's pretty stiff, especially this unwashed stuff. So this looks like a front pocket facing. And you notice with these I don't even use the pattern weights, I just keep my hand down on the piece and yeah, just like that. It's important to have keep the facing, the pocket facing on grain, but most of the other things are not that necessary. You can do pretty much whatever you want with belt loops. The back pocket you can do whatever you want with. The waistband is important, I think, to keep on the right grain. You don't want. I don't want my waistband to be too stretchy, which can happen if you cut it off grain or on the bias, or even if you cut it running alongside. Like if you cut your waistband parallel to the selvage, which is what a lot of people do, the waistband will shrink. It will shrink differently than the top of the pants. So, because if you think about the top of the pants runs across the grain, so, but if you cut the waistband alongside like parallel to the grain, then the waistband itself will be shrinking at a different rate, because the grain and the cross grain shrink differently in denim, especially. I'd say the grain shrinks a lot more than the cross grain does. Plus, I feel like the grain is somewhat stretchier. I'm not sure. This is probably the first time I've ever timed cutting out a full pair of denim jeans, and what I always just assume takes maybe 10 minutes. Obviously, I'm looking at the video length, looks like it takes more like 20 minutes. But I guess that's just how it goes when you enjoy the process. Here I'm doing the waistband, and I'm realizing that I'm doing this contoured waistband now, and I'm realizing that I have to, if I want to cut it out with a full pattern piece, I would need to unfold the piece of denim. And since I'm feeling a little lazy to do that, what I'll do is I'll fold the pattern piece in half. I'm holding it up to the light right now, you can't see that, but I'm holding it up to the light so I can see the lines through the paper. And then I'll fold it in half and check it again. And because I need two, I zip off this little end piece here. Because I need two, what I'll do is I will fold this down in half. Put this on the edge here. So now essentially I've got 4 layers of denim I'm going to be cutting out. And this particular pair of scissors does slow down a bit. You have to go a little bit slower, but compared to cutting out 4 layers with a rotary cutter, it's much easier. I'll probably turn around here in a second so you can watch the other side. There we go. And there's a little bit of a trick to getting around corners. You figure it out. You kind of sometimes you have to kind of angle the blade to get it underneath the layers on the other side. See, when I start, I kind of angle the blade to one side so I can get it underneath the layers, and then, as you can see me trying right now to make sure I'm working and to make sure I've got all 4 layers. It looks like I'm getting really close to my fingers. One thing that's nice about these electric scissors, I think it might be absolutely impossible to cut yourself, even if you had very small fingers. The actual cutting part of the blade is fairly deep inside, and the opening isn't big enough for you to get your finger into, which does limit the number of, I guess it limits the thickness, although I haven't found that to be much of an issue. So there you go, that's our waistband. Throw that up there. More pattern pieces. Oftentimes I will save the pattern pieces until I'm done with, like I'll save maybe 3 patterns back. Sometimes I save them on the computer, because these are all these patterns I'm using are all, done. They're all computer drafted. But oftentimes I'll end up just overwriting the file, and so my only record really is the old paper. And so sometimes I will save back a few pairs, and mostly just for comparison to see how is the pair I'm making now compared to the pair I made, 3 pairs ago. Sometimes that's even easier just using the paper to just compare. You can lay one on top of the other really easily. So what I'm doing now is I'm marking, I'm going to be making belt loops. These days, I'm almost always using the selvage in my belt loop. One of the reasons is because usually there's a nice big straight piece of it, and I always make more belt loops than I need. I don't know, just because I like making belt loops, I guess. And what's nice about the selvage is you can either incorporate that as a design feature in the belt loop itself, so it shows on the outside, or that part can simply be folded to the inside, and you don't see it. And so, for a piece of the denim that would probably never get used. And the reason why I'm drawing the line on is that it's what is difficult using these scissors and why they probably wouldn't work for most quilting people. And you can see this technique as I'm holding the scissors in one place and just moving the fabric through them. It's very difficult to cut up against a ruler or a straight surface with these scissors. The best way, if you need to cut a straight line with the scissors that needs to be a specific width, the best way to do it is to draw on, like you saw me do, draw on a line and then cut on the line. You can't really get close enough to the side of the ruler to cut straight with the ruler, or straight edge, which is why they're not a tool for quilters, really. So now what I'm looking for is some fabric for the pockets, the inside pocket bags. This looks like it'll do just fine. Every once in a while, the fabric, if you go too fast, will get kind of like caught up and jammed in the back of the blade. And I've noticed as the scissors get duller, this pair of dulls, these Black & Deckers, these are only $20, and these don't last forever. The blades themselves, and I have blades on back order that they've been bought in back order for months now. I don't think you can actually get replacement blades anymore. Maybe you can. I haven't been able to find them. The ones I have at work, like I said, I've been using them for a couple months now, and the blades are just as good as when they were brand new. The ones I have at work are about 5 times more expensive than these. Or, you know, you can pick the ones that goes up for $100. Well, these are 20. But since I don't use the scissors that much at home, I think this is a perfectly adequate electric scissor for home use. Although I won't buy another one for myself, I'll get the more expensive ones next time. Because they cut so easily through the fabric, it's actually easier to cut multiple layers, and even with the paper, it's easier to cut multiple layers than just one layer of fabric. One layer of fabric that offers almost no resistance to the blade, and it's almost difficult to control. You end up with some very wobbly cuts. There we go, let's just zip off these pieces of fabric here. And that seems like we're pretty much done. So, I appreciate you watching today. I'm gonna grab all these pieces, wrap them up, and start getting my embroidery on my pockets and get these sewn up. And watch out for the other video. I'll do a more in-depth review of the both parts of electric scissors. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.